Hey, welcome back. So, thank you so much for tuning into episode one. If you haven't already, and you've come to episode two, today we're going to be talking about what makes people buy. What needs to happen in their brain in order for that mechanism where they go, yeah, actually, that makes sense. I feel like you get what's going on, and I'm actually ready to pay for it. And I would say I don't really see this talked about anywhere, to be fair. And it's probably the most powerful thing that we could talk about or we could learn and understand about how the brain works. And then it's almost like this two-way door thing where when you walk through this door, it's almost like you you just can't walk back. Like it's this, I don't know why I called it a two-way door, but it's like this inflection point where you move through, you see what's on the other side, and you just go, what is wrong with the entire industry? Why does nobody know this? Why is everyone doing this the opposite way? And I think we don't get this done well if we don't understand this concept. We never really understand why a sale doesn't occur, which can be deeply frustrating. When you're in that position where you're not sure why the sale is happening, and that same mistake is happening over and over and over again, it just leaves you feeling so hopeless about sales. And I've even seen that transform into sales anxiousness or sales avoidance, where some business owners are just not even taking sales calls, or the sales calls feel really heavy. They feel really difficult and dense. And then it slips into sort of a mindset issue where we start thinking, well, all of the prospects were unqualified anyway, people aren't buying, etc. When in reality, they probably did want to buy. But the really difficult truth to swallow is because we don't understand what a sale is and how to create it in our buyer's mind, that leaves us feeling disempowered. Like that's why we can't do anything about it. And so this is why I'm so passionate about it, is because when we understand this and we truly understand what's going on in our buyer's mind, and we can do that consistently, that unlocks a whole, what would you call it, realm of possibility where we understand how to create that response through specific questioning, which leads us to a place where we actually feel confident in our ability to sell. One of the things my mentor said to me was early on that I loved. He said, Caleb, you will always be okay in business because you know how to sell. He goes, no matter what happens in the industry, the economy, whatever, you will always know how to sell, so you will always be okay. And I guess that's what's on the other side of truly understanding this concept in sales, is this just innate confidence to know that no matter who you speak to, you can convey the value proposition of your services. You can sell yourself in any scenario. And the level of confidence and power that comes with that, I think completely changes the game for business owners. And I just don't think they've ever actually experienced that, which is why they potentially don't value sales the way that they should. I believe I got really lucky having a sales mentor as my first mentor. Yeah, there were probably some business things that I could have known about that would have been really important. Like I wish I knew the importance of building a list and a database. I had massive social media followings back in 2018, 2019. And I think by the end of it, I had bugger all emails. So, there's some things that I wish I knew, but the skill that carried me through the first 8 years of business was just knowing how to speak to a stranger and convey the value of my services and have them thank me for the conversation while paying me. It's a pretty wild concept, right? Where when you understand the skill, that you have that just innate ability to take a curious prospect and turn them into a premium client, which is obviously why I love it. Right? I'm so passionate about it. I want to share it with you today. So with all of that preamble, let's talk about what it actually is. What's a sale? What makes people buy? And so this is a process that we call cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance was taught to me by my second official sales mentor, Darcy Smythe. He's an absolute legend. And he was luckily one of my first mentors, where he explained to me, he said, Caleb, in everybody's mind, there are two positions. There is their current reality in which they experience right now, and there is their future reality or their expectation of where they thought that they would be by now. So let's just, break that down a little bit more. There's a current reality. So what is happening in this moment, today, right now, and some of the things that have happened in the past that have affected the person. Then there is their expectation. Where do I think I would be by now? What were the things that I thought I would have by now? And so if we look in a sales context, you might be listening to the sales podcast because your sales results aren't where you want them to be. And what we mean by that specifically is perhaps you're getting a large volume of calls and inquiries coming through, but they're disqualified, or they're giving you tons of objections, or maybe you've had like 10, 13 calls and none of them have converted. And so your current reality is feeding back to you, this is what's going on. At the same time, you have an expectation. 13 calls might have said no. You might be thinking, well, at least 2 of them should have been clients. I thought by now 2 of them would have been clients. And so this at its core, this frustration, if you will, this tension between where somebody is now and their expectation of where they thought they would be by now, this is the essence of cognitive dissonance. And the degree in which this is built is the degree in which, the strength in which they buy. And I want you to imagine it's like having a rubber band between your 2 thumbs. And this rubber band, if you pull your thumbs out, that rubber band has this tension that wants to pull it back together. And that tension is what your prospect is experiencing. And when we are able to elicit that from them, when we're able to understand what their tension is, they often associate the solution with that. So what I mean by that specifically is we associate a lot of trust and expertise to the person who can language the problem that we're experiencing better than we can. And so if we end up chatting with someone on the phone, you might have had this experience. I had this experience. It was amazing, where I hired this consultant to look at some attribution issues that I was having with my Facebook ads. So attribution issue is the ads were sending, traffic, and that traffic was making sales, but the Facebook platform wasn't receiving that information. So then my ads don't scale up with the information, like if the ad is driving a sale, Facebook needs to know about it because it optimizes for that, and it wasn't doing that. So when I got on the call with him, he was just able to just acknowledge and highlight my problem and describe it to me in words better than I could describe myself, that I was just like, wow, this is the guy. And it just made so much sense that he didn't even need to build much of a cognitive dissonance with me. I was just, yeah, okay, cool, I trust you, let's go. And this is really interesting if we think about how trust has changed in the last far out 2 years within our industry. Trust is at an all-time low, which means in the sales conversation, we have to work so much harder to build that trust. And one of the best ways to get trust with somebody is to be able to language their problem better than they can. And this is effectively what selling with cognitive dissonance does, is when we're able to explore what is going on for you now and where did you expect that you wanted to be, we're able to gain that trust. We're able to figure out why a sale should occur here or why it shouldn't occur here. And this is what's missing for most business owners. Is most business owners and salespeople that I train, they just wing it. But if we go one layer deeper, there's a second part of this that's really important. And it's understanding the difference between the left and the right brain. Is this gap that we have, this expectation, this reality of right now versus the expectation, that's split into 2 categories. There's emotional experience of now and emotional expectation. There is logical experience of now and logical expectation. And the emotional expectations or realities is things that we feel. So it's the internal, it's the right brain. And so this looks like things like when the prospect tells you how it's impacting them personally. So they might say, because these sales calls that I'm having are not converting, I feel hopeless. I feel stuck. And if you think back to how I described this problem at the start of the call, you might notice, well, not call, podcast, you might notice that I actually created a cognitive dissonance for this podcast decision. I talked about what would happen if you don't have this process and you don't understand how sales works, that your logical problems could be not enough sales coming through, too many objections, and that you might feel hopeless. You might feel powerless. Then we looked at the other side, which was you would feel confident, you would feel certain, you would be consistent in your sales process. And so this cognitive dissonance doesn't just apply to sales. It can apply to all areas of life, especially storytelling, presentations, all that kind of stuff. But let's tidy up the emotional side of things. So emotions are concepts that exist inside of us. I feel this way. It's affecting me like this. Then we have the other side, which is logical. So logical are things that exist outside of us, external to us. So things like conversion rates, sales, marketing, business. I like to go through the wheel of life when I'm investigating logical sort of consequences or outcomes. It's things like how's it affecting their health, their career, their business, their finances, their relationships. And so we have this gap between where they are now that's emotional and logical and where they want it to be that's emotional and logical. When we paint that up, it actually looks like a quadrant, right? So on the left-hand side of the quadrant, we have this, what would you call it? Like we have an emotional quadrant and we have a logical quadrant of the left-hand side, which is the pain of right now, right? Or what they're experiencing now. So in the logical quadrant goes low conversion, too many objections, not enough revenue. In the emotional quadrant goes powerless, stuck, confused. Then on the other side, right, the right-hand side, now we're painting the future or their expectations. My expectation is that I wanted to close 5 or 6 sales. I wanted to drive $5,000 to $10,000 of revenue and extra revenue every month. I want to feel confident, and I want to feel consistent, and I want to feel empowered. So this quadrant that we've created now, where we've ticked off the logical and the emotional, this is what makes a sale happen. And if you have the playbook already, inside of the playbook, there's a diagram, I believe it's on like page 4, where it shows you this quadrant. If you don't have the playbook, click the below www.caleblesa.com/playbook. You'll be able to get yourself a copy. So what do we then do with this quadrant? So we're going to go a little bit deeper, but once this quadrant is established and we have the emotion and the logic, the emotion is important because this is the fire under their bum that creates the urgency. And the mistakes that I see with no emotion in sales is often in places like real estate, IT, finance, insurance, is they're very benefit heavy, right? Logical, you should do this because it's logical, blah, blah, blah. And you get lots of, I think about it, there's no urgency because the urgency comes from the emotion. The urgency is the fire under their butt. Now, emotion alone is not great because it leads to buyer's remorse. And there's a very famous personal development guru who also has a very high buyer's remorse rate after his events because everyone gets hyped up on emotion and they look to go and run to the back of the room to go buy. And then they go buy, then the next day they have a logical hangover. They go, why did I spend 20 grand on that? Because the logic was not there, but they were emotionally in. So they refund. So we don't just want emotion. And we don't just want logic either, right? Like a logic to logic sale is the sexless marriage. I was like, here are all the logical reasons why you should do this. Very common in B2B. Here are the logical outcomes, but there's no emotion. And that person, there's a degree of urgency or how it would affect them that we need to elicit. Now, B2B is a little bit more nuanced than B2C when it comes to eliciting the emotion, because often the person in that position is not emotionally invested in the outcome, but they still have emotional payoffs that would motivate them to get this done. So in the B2B space, we actually have to be a little bit more nuanced. It's probably beyond this podcast per se, where we still want to establish the logic and emotion, but it's nuanced because we don't directly ask them, how do you feel about that? Because they'll go, well, that feels weird. But from a B2C perspective, it's much easier to ask the person who's making the purchase, what happens if you don't do this? How would it affect you? What happens if you did do this? How would it impact you? And so If you want some help with those questions, make sure you get a copy of the playbook because I break down all of these questions and we actually go much more in depth. But this is the core premise here. This premise that we're talking about, this is called cognitive dissonance. And this quadrant is really powerful to understand, is if the person has not brought from you, chances are there's a part of the quadrant missing. And you want to look at your sales calls through this lens of like, did I tick off the emotion? Did I tick off the logic? And if you start doing that, you're going to start making more sales. So I trust this was valuable. This is what makes people buy. This is a concept of cognitive dissonance. If you're loving this so far, just drop us a comment below. But if you could, leave us a review. That'd be epic. Like we love reviews. Help us sort of get this podcast out to more people. Share it with someone if you really enjoyed it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode.